Bob Farnham part of the show? I can't remember.
I think we should interview Bob Farnham. I think be
Oh, that'd be
interested.
good. We
Oh,
could get his story of how he became Bob the Green Guy.
It's fascinating.
Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
good morning, Chris. I'm doing okay. We're
No.
it's starting to feel like adjournment season, right?
Oh my God, Friday's hurtling. It's not very warm outside, but it is bright and sunny. The leaves are coming out, so it must be time for the legislature to go home.
Yes. Or I don't know.
Yeah,
Go anywhere.
the legislature to stop beaming in from home.
Oh yeah.
That'll be nice.
Pretty wild to see all of us doing all of this really heavy work from from the confines of our own dining room.
Yeah, considering how much the legislature feels like it works on the in-between spaces and conversations, and I would give us okay marks, definitely.
Yeah.
And climate really is a sort of almost not controversial. If anything, the controversy is like
How much more can we do? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let's just sort of, Sarah and I were talking before, we don't have a lot of details to share because we've been super busy, but there is some, what I would say, the general kind of framework that's pretty interesting. So, do you want to lay it out, Sarah? Should I give us the snapshot? What do you like?
Well, let me start, and then I'm going to kick it over to you. So it's amazing to be in this moment, I think, where we are looking at an incredible amount of climate investment in these bills that are coming to a closure. A large part of that is because of the federal money that's coming into the state, but it's also, it's an alignment of House, Senate, and Governor all sort of realizing that, okay, this is where we need to invest. This is where we need to focus dollars. And so there's a little bit of, wrangling back and forth about, this is our plan, that's your plan. But it's really heartening to see that we're actually, we've sort of got this dynamic where like people are scrambling to the front of the line to say, I did, good work on climate this year, which is just phenomenal, given how many years, you and I as, Climate Caucus members have just been trying to get, like a couple of $1 million here and there.
Yeah.
So why don't we run through some of the details?
Well, and
as best we know them.
you're right. We have for years just tried to elevate, like, hey, this is important issues. It's important to Vermonters. It's important to our future, our economy. And now it's sort of like not quite this way, but people are like pulling us in. Hey, what should we be doing? So the Senate passed the budget last week or earlier this week, and it reserved $100 million for next year, basically to react to the Climate Council's plan, right? And the House had done something similar. You guys, though, I'm starting, the more of the details emerge, the federal ARPA money, as we call it, wasn't fully baked by the time the House budget was moving. So the Senate gets the advantage of saying, thank you for your first draft, House. And by the way, now we've got $1 billion. So anyway, the Senate reserved that. I think that's basically in keeping with, as I understand it, what the House is interested in. Then there was already about a doubling of weatherization money up to about $35 million, although that's not all directly weatherization. It's like some of the workforce, some of the kind of almost working with families to counsel them on and really help them budget and
Right.
think about energy use, as well as all that stuff, transportation. There's tons of investments, or I should say not tons. There's an ongoing investment in more sustainable transportation, from kind of a cash for clunkers-esque program. There's charging stations, there's incentives for EVs. So that work continues. But what I think is interesting, and we can only kind of sketch it out for viewers, because I'm still sketchy on the details, but the governor is sort of strutting around saying the legislature is not as committed to climate as I am, and in my ARPA outline, I think we should spend 200 million on climate. And so, wait a minute, this is a guy that vetoed the Global Warming Solutions Act, um, but does seem to have said, okay, if we've got money, let's put it into the sort of triple bottom line that you and I've talked about, and climate, jobs, helping Vermonters save money. Can't argue with that. Hilarious to find this jockeying. So let's break it down just a little bit, because the 200 million is not quite all that it seems, as I understand it.
You wouldn't necessarily define it all as strictly climate related. Environmental, yes, but there's a fair chunk of investment in clean water there, which is good. It's a good investment, and it will help us with resilience. It will help us clean up our waterways, but it doesn't necessarily have a strict climate link in that it's not reducing emissions directly.
Yeah, that's right. And they're reacting to emissions and some of the impact of our rugged living in terms of water pollution, chemicals, and things like that. But so when you pull it apart, the 200 million whittles down a little bit, but it's still a big number, and it's still the right signal. And do you think, Sarah, what I hope is that you and I and others, this conversation's starting, can say, look, let's match the governor. I mean, he's got a big number. Let's make sure we have a big number. And we already have a big number on the table in terms of out year, the American Rescue ARPA, what is it? I can never remember the actual words. The ARPA money, we get 3 or 4 years to spend that. So part of what the jockeying is what are we going to do in the out years? And that's where the governor's given us a good opportunity to bring it up, to match him. And all governors play these shell games where they categorize money differently, or they just realize we've been spending $50 million on this for a long time, but then they call it something new. That's inevitable. And the legislature does it too. But a great opportunity and a real seismic shift in attitude.
Yeah, I mean, we had really good attendance at our climate caucus yesterday because we let folks know that we were going to review what some of those spending levels were. And, people were really interested in that, asking how they could get, help, what sort of advocacy do we need to do right now as the House and Senate are working out their differences. And so I feel like we're poised for a really good end of session in terms of how we prioritize our climate spending.
I hope that's true. And then, and this will be subject to some of the same games, but the Senate, for instance, the House matched us, or we're in I think basic agreement, 150 million, if not more, for broadband.
Yeah.
Now, I would argue that is, frankly, a sustainable infrastructure investment. There's been talk about big dollar amounts for downtown sewage and water treatment. Again, if we were helping people live downtown and not sprawl, that's less vehicle miles, et cetera. So I wouldn't want to count those big numbers and let us say, hey, look, we're doing all this for climate necessarily, but it clearly has an impact that is part of our sustainable future.
Yeah, it's pretty neat to see a lot of these. I mean, it almost feels like the gears are finally meshing.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit at Climate Caucus yesterday about a grant program for homeowners or landlords in downtown areas to be able to rebuild weatherize, get their blighted properties, habitable again. I think you and I can picture many small towns you drive through in Vermont and, oh, look, that house is empty. Oh, look, that house looks like it's been abandoned. And, speaking of getting people living downtown, a lot of times what is necessary is, oh my gosh, this house hasn't been, updated in 40 years and who would want to live there? So, if we can do some of these little things, it really is starting to feel like, hey, this is revitalization for our downtowns. This is sustainable living, because we've got people, living in the village where they can walk to the store and walk to the library and walk to school. And,
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of these things are coming together in a way that, a year ago, you and I really couldn't have imagined this.
Well, and I totally agree. And these are big numbers, $100 million. I mean, that's a pretty unbelievable number. And then we're jockeying to see if that's, big enough. And it's clearly not big enough, right? Right. We're not, please don't hear us saying, hey, we're done, good job. But a seismic shift. And then of course you have Biden and the White House declaring very aggressive, emission reduction energy goals. And that is going to also, no question in my mind, involve getting money to states to implement this, right? The federal government doesn't implement a lot. They implement things by paying states to implement things. So, maybe our timing is right? The grassroots, you and I, others in the legislature have been fighting on this, and maybe we just have enough of slightly rickety, but a better foundation than a lot of states to build on. And, I'm hopeful. I have to tell you, because, I'm the vice chair of the Senate Ag, and I really enjoy the Ag committee in the morning. It's we just passed this compost, making it easier for farms to take on themselves, develop a small compost operation. Right now, we're trucking our compost to Maine. A bunch of the states. That's outrageous. And
that we should be keeping here, right?
Keep it local, build soil, small diversification for farms, which is important for the ag economy. We also got a little bit of money in for schools to be able to buy local food. I mean, these are clearly climate pieces. When we stop importing tomatoes from California, or we import half the tomatoes we're importing from California right now and get them down the road, that has a serious climate impact, not to say nothing of a economic impact for our farmers. So little shifts like that hopefully are adding up over time. And I just can't thank you enough, Sarah, but really people watching, all 10 of you, the grassroots pressure, right? And Sarah and I can't wait to get out there and talk with people directly again. This has made a huge difference.
Yeah.
People can't.
Absolutely. We hear from our colleagues in the House and the Senate all the time who say, my constituents are they're really dialed in. They really want to see us do more on climate. They want to see us be a leader instead of sort of languishing in the middle of the pack. And so, it has made a huge difference. It helped us to override the governor's veto on global warming. It has amounted to a tremendous outpouring of interest. I mean, when you watch the Climate Council meetings, they've got members of the public who are avid followers, and watching the subcommittees who are there designing the different components of our climate plan that we'll be able to take a peek at later in this year. And all of that is because Vermonters really care about climate. So I'm really excited to see the kind of energy that's coming out to push this forward.
Hear, hear. Well, that's I think all the details we have. Scant details, but hopefully give you a broad overview of some of the moves happening right now around the Capitol.
Yeah. We'll keep an eye on that budget and a few more of our climate bills, and we'll be back next week with more details.
Nice to see you, Sarah.
See you, Chris.